Hey everyone, welcome to Dr. Sleep. We love creating unique content for you, but we need your support now more than ever. Our channel is facing some challenges, and we really need your interaction. If you enjoy what we offer, please subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share our videos with your friends. Every comment, like, and share makes a huge difference. Let's grow together and keep bringing you the content you care about. Thank you for your continued support. It started with the kind of story that spreads in whispers, the kind that grows legs and walks around in the dark corners of small towns. People said a bridge appeared at midnight deep in the woods, a bridge that didn't exist on any map. Those who saw it claimed it wasn't made of wood or stone, but something darker, something slick and unnatural. If you crossed it, you wouldn't come back, at least not all of you. For Ellie and her younger brother Sam, the story wasn't just a ghost tale to pass the time. It was a clue. Their middle sibling Luke had been missing for 6 months. One day he'd been working the night shift at the gas station. The next, his car was abandoned at the edge of the forest, keys still in the ignition, like he'd just walked off into the trees. No note, no calls, just silence. Ellie was the practical one, 28 years old, with her brown hair tied in a messy bun and dark circles under her eyes that had taken up permanent residence. She'd been the one to organize search parties, combing the forest trails with flashlights and maps, calling out Luke's name until her voice cracked. Sam, at 21, was different, impulsive, sarcastic, and prone to biting his nails when things got tough. The youngest in the family, he'd always been in Luke's shadow, trying to keep up. But now, with Luke gone, Sam had taken it hard. Too hard. The stories about the midnight bridge came from a late-night tip in a diner. An old man with a leathery face leaned across the counter and muttered, "The bridge gets people like your brother. If you want him back, go find it. But don't say I didn't warn you." His eyes were dead serious, and Ellie had felt a chill run down her spine. They didn't tell their parents where they were going. Mom had started sleeping with the TV on, and Dad had buried himself in fixing the old Chevy in the garage. They didn't need more reasons to worry. So one cold November night, Ellie and Sam packed flashlights, snacks, and a camping knife, then headed for the forest. The woods felt alive in the way old forests sometimes do, with the kind of quiet that's not really quiet at all. The wind hissed through the branches, and leaves crackled under their boots, even though neither of them spoke much. Ellie gripped her flashlight like it was a weapon, while Sam kept glancing over his shoulder like he expected something to jump out of the darkness. As they walked deeper, the air grew colder. Not the normal chill of the season, but a biting, unnatural cold that seemed to seep through their jackets and into their bones. Ellie's breath came out in frosty puffs, and Sam cursed under his breath, rubbing his gloved hands together. Midnight was coming, and with it maybe the bridge, or maybe something worse. The forest grew darker even with the full moon hovering above. Its light seemed unable to penetrate the thick canopy of trees, as if the shadows themselves were swallowing it whole. Ellie checked her phone for the time. 11:57 p.m. They were close. She could feel it, though she couldn't explain why. The air had grown heavy, pressing down on her chest with every step, and even Sam, normally quick with a joke, had gone silent. Then they saw it. At first, it was just a shimmer through the trees, like moonlight reflecting off water. But as they stepped closer, the shimmering grew more defined. The bridge didn't materialize all at once. It unfolded, piece by piece, as if it were being constructed out of the night itself. The planks were black, glossy, and smooth, with an almost liquid sheen that glimmered under the moonlight. The railings arched unnaturally, twisting like the ribcage of some long-dead creature. It stretched across a deep ravine they hadn't noticed before, its depths swallowed by shadows. The air around it hummed faintly, like the sound of distant electricity. But Ellie and Sam heard no rushing water below, just silence. "Holy shit," Sam whispered, stepping closer. He stopped abruptly, his eyes darting to Ellie. "You see that, right? Please tell me you see that." Ellie nodded, her throat too dry to speak. Her grip tightened on her flashlight, though she didn't bother shining it at the bridge. Somehow she knew the light wouldn't reach it, or if it did, it would only reveal things she didn't want to see. "Think it's safe?" Sam asked, his voice trembling despite the casual tone he tried to force. "No," Ellie said flatly. "But we're here, aren't we?" Sam hesitated, but only for a moment. "All right, let's do this." They stepped onto the bridge together. The wood, or whatever it was, surprisingly solid beneath their boots. Ellie glanced down and immediately regretted it. The planks weren't smooth at all. They were etched with strange symbols, carvings that seemed to writhe and shift when she tried to focus on them. She looked away, her stomach twisting. The further they walked, the thicker the mist became. It crept up from the ravine, curling around their legs like living tendrils, chilling their skin through their clothes. Sam muttered something about it smelling like damp earth and rusted metal, but Ellie didn't respond. She was too focused on the way the mist seemed to shift, forming shapes that dissolved as quickly as they appeared. Halfway across the bridge, they heard it, a low, mournful sound, like a distant moan carried on the wind. Ellie froze, her heart hammering in her chest. "Did you hear that?" she asked. Sam nodded, his face pale. "It's probably nothing," he said, but his voice betrayed him. Ellie didn't believe him, but she didn't argue. She just kept walking, her eyes fixed on the misty world ahead. The end of the bridge was near, a dark curtain of fog waiting to swallow them whole. When they stepped off the bridge, the world felt different. The air was colder, heavier, and the forest around them was silent, too silent. No rustling leaves, no chirping insects, just the sound of their breathing and the faint hum of the bridge behind them. Ellie turned to look back, but the bridge was already gone, swallowed by the fog. "We're in it now," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "Yeah," Sam said, his eyes scanning the eerie forest ahead. "Let's find Luke and get the hell out of here." The forest beyond the bridge was nothing like the one they had left behind. The trees were massive, their twisted trunks blackened as if burned, and their gnarled branches clawed at the gray sky above. The ground beneath Ellie and Sam's boots was soft, almost spongy, and their footsteps sank slightly into it, leaving faint impressions that seemed to fade almost as soon as they moved on. "What is this place?" Sam whispered, his voice unusually hushed. Ellie shook her head, unable to find an answer. She didn't want to think about it too hard. The air was heavy with an unnatural stillness, the kind that didn't just muffle sound but seemed to consume it entirely. Even their breathing felt wrong, too loud, like an intrusion in a place that didn't want them there. They pressed on, their flashlights cutting weak beams through the dense fog. Ellie's mind raced as they walked. Her logical side, always the louder voice in her head, told her to turn back, even though the bridge was gone. But the rest of her, the part that had spent 6 months agonizing over Luke's disappearance, refused to give up. "Ellie," Sam said, stopping suddenly. She turned to him and saw the fear in his wide eyes. "What?" He pointed ahead, his hand trembling. At first, Ellie didn't see anything. Then the fog shifted, and she saw it. A figure standing motionless among the trees. It was a man, or at least it had been at some point. His clothes were tattered and stained, his face pale and drawn, as if the life had been sucked out of him. He was staring at them, though his eyes were blank and unfocused, like those of a doll. "Do you think he's—" Sam trailed off, his voice shaking. Ellie swallowed hard. "Let's just keep moving." As they edged past the figure, Ellie kept her eyes on it, her muscles tensed, ready to run if it so much as twitched. But it didn't. It just stood there, staring blankly into the mist. Not long after, they came across more of them. Men, women, even children, all frozen in various poses. Some sitting, some standing, others crouched as if they'd fallen. Their faces were all the same, blank, lifeless, their eyes staring into nothing. "Are they?" Sam whispered, his voice barely audible. "Dead?" Ellie didn't answer. She didn't know if she could call these things dead. They were something else, something worse. The fog grew thicker as they walked, wrapping around them like a living thing. It wasn't just the cold anymore. It felt invasive, seeping into their skin, their minds. Ellie began to feel lightheaded, her thoughts muddling as if the fog was trying to pull her under. Then she heard it. A faint, familiar voice carried on the still air. "Ellie." Her heart lurched. It was Luke's voice, distant but unmistakable. "Did you hear that?" she asked, grabbing Sam's arm. He nodded, his face pale. "It's him, it's Luke." They exchanged a look, a mix of hope and fear. before turning toward the sound. "Luke," Ellie called out, her voice echoing strangely in the fog. "We're coming," the voice called again, closer now. "Ellie, Sam." The siblings quickened their pace, their fear momentarily forgotten. But as the mist swirled thicker around them, Ellie couldn't shake the nagging feeling in the back of her mind. Something was wrong. The voice grew clearer as they pressed on, pulling them deeper into the fog. Ellie's chest tightened with a mix of desperation and dread. She had spent months longing to hear her brother's voice again, but now, in this place, it felt wrong, like a melody played slightly out of tune. "Luke!" she shouted again, her voice trembling. Sam stayed close, his flashlight sweeping nervously through the mist. The voice answered, closer now. "Ellie! Sam! Help me!" The siblings broke into a jog, the soft ground sucking at their boots with each step. The fog seemed to pulse around them, almost alive, twisting their sense of direction. Ellie's flashlight beam wavered, catching glimpses of movement in the corners of her vision, shapes flitting between the trees. "Do you see that?" Sam whispered. Ellie nodded but didn't slow down. She didn't want to think about what those shapes might be, not now. All that mattered was getting to Luke. The voice led them to a clearing, where the fog thinned just enough to reveal a crude wooden signpost. The sign was old and weathered, the letters carved into its surface barely legible. "Stay out," Sam scoffed nervously. "Yeah, that's not ominous at all." Ellie ignored him, her eyes scanning the clearing. She could feel Luke's presence, she was sure of it, but he wasn't here. The fog swirled around them, thick and restless. Then something moved. At the edge of the clearing, a figure stepped out of the mist. It was a man, tall and gaunt, with pale skin stretched tight over his bones. His eyes were sunken, his lips cracked, and his clothes hung in tatters. But what struck Ellie most was his expression, hollow, devoid of emotion, like a marionette waiting for its strings to be pulled. Sam froze. "What the hell?" The man's head tilted unnaturally, his neck cracking as if it hadn't moved in years. His empty eyes locked onto Ellie, and for a moment neither of them breathed. Then he spoke. "You shouldn't be here." His voice was a rasp, dry and broken, like dead leaves crunching underfoot. "We're looking for our brother," Ellie said, her voice steadier than she felt. The man didn't respond. Instead, he stepped closer, his movements jerky, unnatural. The fog swirled around him as though it were part of him, clinging to his body like a second skin. Ellie instinctively stepped back, pulling Sam with her. "Do you know where he is?" she pressed. The man stopped a few feet away, his head cocking to the other side. He crossed, like the others. "What does that mean?" Sam demanded, his voice rising. The man's lips curled into something that might have been a smile, but it was wrong. Too wide, too sharp. "The bridge doesn't give, it takes." Ellie's stomach churned. "What did it take from you?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he reached out, his long skeletal fingers stretching toward them. Ellie yanked Sam back, her flashlight beam catching the glint of something in the man's other hand, a rusted chain dangling from his wrist. "We need to go," Ellie whispered, her voice barely audible. Sam didn't argue. Together they backed away from the man, their movements slow and deliberate. But as they turned to leave, a new voice echoed through the mist, a voice they knew too well. "Ellie, Sam, please help me." Luke's voice. Ellie's heart leapt, but the man in the clearing stiffened, his head snapping toward the sound. His lips moved, forming a single word. "Don't." But it was too late. Ellie and Sam were already running toward the voice, deeper into the mist. The fog thickened as Ellie and Sam ran toward the voice, each step dragging them deeper into the unknown. Their flashlights cast weak beams that barely pierced the swirling mist, and the ground seemed to shift beneath their feet, like a living thing trying to trip them up. "Luke!" Ellie shouted, her voice raw. "Where are you?" "Keep going," Luke's voice called back, distant but clear. "I'm here, don't stop." Sam stumbled, catching himself on a twisted tree. "Ellie, what if it's not him?" he panted. "It's him," she snapped. Though doubt gnawed at her resolve, she had to believe it was Luke. If she didn't, what was the point of all this? They reached a small clearing, where the fog thinned just enough to reveal a structure. It was a wooden cabin, sagging and warped with age. The roof was partially caved in, and the windows were dark and cracked. A faint light flickered inside, casting shadows that danced like broken puppets on the walls. Ellie hesitated, her instincts screaming at her to turn back. But then Luke's voice called again, closer now. "Ellie! Sam, help me!" Sam grabbed her arm. "Ellie, wait! What if this is a trap? That guy back there, what he said." "I don't care," Ellie said, shaking him off. "If there's a chance Luke's in there, I'm not leaving him." She pushed open the cabin door and it creaked loudly, the sound echoing unnaturally in the still air. Inside, the light came from a single lantern sitting on a rickety table. The room was small and bare, with a dirt floor and walls covered in strange symbols carved deep into the wood. And in the corner, huddled on the ground, was Luke. Ellie's breath caught. He looked thinner, his face pale and his eyes sunken. But it was him. He looked up at her, and the relief in his expression was so raw, so real, that it left no room for doubt. "Ellie, Sam," he rasped, his voice trembling. "Luke." Ellie rushed to him, dropping to her knees and wrapping her arms around him. He was cold, his body trembling like a leaf in the wind. Sam hovered near the door, his flashlight darting around the room. "What is this place? How long have you been here?" "Too long," Luke murmured, his voice barely audible. "It's hard to remember. Time doesn't work right here." Ellie pulled back to look at him. "We're getting you out of here, okay? You're coming home." Luke's eyes widened and he shook his head weakly. "No, you can't. The bridge, it won't let us all leave." "What are you talking about?" Sam demanded, stepping closer. Luke's gaze flickered to the carvings on the walls. "The bridge takes one for everyone it gives back. It's the rule. If you want to leave, someone has to stay." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Ellie's heart pounded, her mind racing. She shook her head. "No, there's another way. There has to be." Luke reached out, his fingers curling weakly around her wrist. "Ellie, it's already too late. It won't let us go without a price." Sam's flashlight beam landed on a new set of symbols carved into the floor, fresh and glistening as if they'd been etched moments ago. He swallowed hard. "Ellie, we're not alone." The fog outside the cabin began to thicken, pressing against the windows like a living thing. The hum they'd heard on the bridge grew louder, resonating through the cabin walls. Ellie looked at Luke, her jaw clenched. "We're not leaving you behind. I don't care what it takes." But deep down, she knew the bridge didn't care about promises. The hum outside rose to a low, resonating growl, vibrating the walls of the cabin. The flickering lantern dimmed, casting deep shadows that seemed to shift and stretch across the room. Ellie tightened her grip on Luke's cold hand, her pulse thundering in her ears. "Ellie." Sam's voice was shaky as his flashlight beam swept the walls, highlighting the strange carvings. "These symbols, they're moving." She glanced up and felt her stomach drop. The symbols carved into the wood seemed alive, writhing and twisting in ways that defied logic, as if they were trying to communicate or warn them. "Stop looking at them," Ellie snapped, dragging her eyes away. She pulled Luke to his feet, his weight sagging heavily against her. "We're leaving. Now." "No," Luke whispered, his voice trembling. "It won't let us." The growl outside deepened, turning into a guttural roar that reverberated in Ellie's chest. The fog outside pressed harder against the windows, the glass rattling under the strain. For a moment she thought it might shatter, letting whatever was out there pour inside. "We don't have a choice," Ellie said, her voice firm despite the panic clawing at her insides. She turned to Sam. "Help me." Sam hesitated, his face pale in the dim light. "Ellie, he said someone has to stay. What if—" "Don't." Her voice was sharp, cutting through the growing noise. "We're all getting out of here. No one stays behind." Sam nodded reluctantly and moved to Luke's other side, slinging his arm over his shoulder. Together, they half carried him toward the door. As Ellie reached for the handle, the room plunged into complete darkness. The lantern extinguished with a faint hiss, and the flashlight beams flickered wildly before sputtering out, leaving them blind in the suffocating black. Then came the voices. They weren't whispers. Ellie was thankful for that. But they were low, guttural, and inhuman. The words were incomprehensible, but the malice in them was unmistakable. The fog outside the cabin seemed to seep through the cracks in the walls, curling around their ankles like cold, wet hands. "Keep moving," Ellie urged, her voice barely audible over the rising cacophony. The door wouldn't budge. She yanked at the handle with all her strength, but it felt as if the wood itself had fused together. Behind her, the voices grew louder, overlapping into a chaotic, grating chorus. Something thudded against the walls, and she swore she could feel the cabin itself shuddering under the assault. "Ellie," Luke's voice was weak but urgent. "It's the mist. It's trying to keep us here." She turned to him, her eyes straining to see anything in the oppressive dark. "What does it want?" Luke's answer came slowly, painfully. "To take one of us. That's the rule." Ellie clenched her jaw. "Then we'll break the damn rule." She groped blindly for something, anything that could help. Her fingers brushed against the table, and she grabbed the lantern, shaking it until the flame sputtered weakly back to life. The faint light illuminated the room just enough for her to see what had been hidden in the dark. Shapes. Dozens of them. They were pressed against the walls, humanoid figures made of swirling mist, their hollow eyes fixed on her. They were still, but the malevolence radiating from them was palpable, a physical force that pressed against her chest. "They're watching us," Sam whispered, his voice trembling. Ellie tightened her grip on the lantern. "Then let them watch. We're not staying." The mist figures didn't move, but the door groaned as if in response, the handle suddenly loosening under her hand. She shoved it open and the fog poured in, cold and relentless, as if trying to drag them back. But Ellie pushed through, pulling her brothers with her into the night. The fog was waiting for them outside, thick and suffocating. And somewhere within it, something was moving. The mist closed in around them the moment they stepped outside. Ellie tightened her grip on Luke, her free hand holding the lantern high. Its weak, flickering light was barely enough to push back the encroaching fog, which moved like a living thing, swirling and shifting in unnatural patterns. "Keep moving," Ellie urged, her voice firm despite the fear clawing at her chest. Sam, on Luke's other side, glanced nervously around. "It's too thick, we can't see a thing." "We don't need to see," Ellie snapped. "We just need to get away from that cabin." But the mist had other plans. Shapes began to form in the fog, indistinct at first but quickly solidifying. Figures loomed around them, their features obscured but their presence undeniable. They didn't move, didn't speak, but their sheer proximity made Ellie's skin crawl. "Ellie," Luke whispered, his voice weak. "They're the others." She glanced at him, her brow furrowing. "What others?" "The ones who didn't make it. They're trapped here, watching." The thought sent a chill through her, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. Her boots squelched against the damp ground as she pushed forward, her focus narrowing to the path directly ahead. But the path wasn't steady. It twisted and shifted underfoot, the forest seeming to rearrange itself around them. Trees appeared where there had been none, and familiar landmarks seemed to vanish into the mist. "It's messing with us," Sam muttered, his voice tight with frustration. "We're going in circles." "No," Ellie said through gritted teeth. "We're not. Just keep going." The shapes in the mist grew bolder, stepping closer. Ellie caught glimpses of their faces, pale, hollow-eyed, their mouths twisted in silent screams. One of them reached out as they passed, its hand disintegrating into tendrils of fog before it could make contact. Luke stumbled, nearly dragging them both down. "I can't," he gasped. "Yes, you can," Ellie said, her tone sharper than she intended. "We didn't come this far to lose you now." But the mist wasn't giving up. It coiled around them, pulling at their clothes, their limbs, like it was trying to drag them back. Ellie felt the air grow colder, the chill biting into her skin despite the layers she wore. And then she heard it again. Luke's voice. Not the weak, rasping voice of the brother leaning heavily on her shoulder, but a stronger, more vibrant version. It came from somewhere ahead, clear and confident. "Ellie, Sam, over here." Sam froze, his eyes wide. That's Luke." Ellie's stomach twisted. She didn't know what to believe anymore. "No, it's not him. It can't be." But the voice called again, insistent. "Hurry, this way." Sam hesitated, his grip on Luke loosening. "What if it is him? What if he's—" "It's not," Ellie snapped, her voice cutting through the fog. The real Luke stirred beside her, his head lolling weakly. Don't listen," he murmured, but Sam was already pulling away, stepping toward the voice. "Sam!" Ellie shouted, reaching for him. The fog thickened, swallowing him up before her fingers could grasp his jacket. "Sam!" Ellie screamed, panic surging through her as the mist closed in tighter, pressing against her like a suffocating weight. And then, as suddenly as it had taken him, the fog began to recede. The shapes dissolved, the air growing still. Ellie spun around, her heart pounding. Sam was gone, and so was the path. Ellie stood frozen, the lantern trembling in her hand as she stared into the fog. The space where Sam had been moments ago was now empty, the mist swirling as if mocking her. "Sam!" she screamed, her voice echoing into the void. There was no reply, only the oppressive silence that seemed to press harder against her chest. Beside her, Luke slumped to his knees, his weight too much for her to bear alone. He looked up at her, his pale face etched with fear and guilt. "I told you, it takes what it wants." Ellie dropped down beside him, gripping his shoulders tightly. "We're not losing him too. Do you hear me? We're getting out of here, all of us." Luke's eyes brimmed with tears, and for the first time Ellie saw how broken he truly was. "You don't understand. The bridge has rules. It doesn't care what you want. It doesn't care about fairness." Ellie shook him, her frustration boiling over. "Then we'll break the damn rules. You said it yourself. Someone has to stay. Fine. It's me. I'll stay." "No," Luke's voice cracked, the desperation in it cutting through the thick air. "It doesn't work like that. It chooses. You don't get to decide." Ellie's grip faltered, her heart pounding as the reality of his words sank in. "And what are we supposed to do?" Luke looked away, his gaze distant. "I don't know. I've tried everything. Bargaining, running, fighting. It always wins." Ellie refused to accept that. She pulled Luke to his feet, her jaw clenched. "Well, it hasn't met me yet." She turned back toward the swirling mist, her knuckles white around the lantern's handle. The glow barely cut through the darkness, but it was enough to show the faintest of trails, a path leading deeper into the unknown. "We're finding him," she said, her voice steady. Luke hesitated, his body trembling as he leaned on her for support. "Ellie, what if it's already taken him?" Her chest tightened, but she shook her head. "Then we'll take him back." They followed the faint path, the fog pressing close on all sides. The mist moved unnaturally, curling and twisting in ways that defied logic. Shapes flickered in and out of view, some human-like, others grotesquely alien. Ellie kept her focus forward, her grip on Luke tightening every time he stumbled. The hum that had plagued them since the bridge was growing louder, a low, resonating thrum that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It vibrated in Ellie's skull, making it hard to think. "Ellie," Luke's voice was weak, barely audible over the sound. "It's close." She didn't need to ask what he meant. She could feel it too, a presence watching them, waiting. Ahead, the path widened into another clearing. In the center stood a massive stone arch, its surface carved with the same shifting symbols as the cabin walls. Beyond it, the fog swirled violently, like a storm waiting to break. And there, at the edge of the arch, was Sam. He stood motionless, his back to them, his flashlight dangling limply in his hand. "Sam," Ellie called, relief and fear flooding her in equal measure. She hurried forward, dragging Luke with her. But as she approached, something about Sam's stance made her slow. His shoulders were too stiff, his head tilted at an unnatural angle. "Sam?" she said again, her voice wavering. He turned slowly, and Ellie's blood ran cold. His face was blank, his eyes hollow. A faint smile twisted his lips, but it wasn't his. "It's not him," Luke whispered, his voice trembling. Ellie's grip on the lantern tightened as Sam, or whatever was pretending to be him, stepped closer. "Ellie," he said, his voice flat and lifeless. "It's okay. I found the way out." Ellie froze, her breath caught in her throat. The thing that looked like Sam stood a few feet away, its face eerily calm, its voice hollow. The flickering lantern light cast shadows across its features, exaggerating the wrongness of it all. "Ellie," it said again with a smile that didn't belong to her brother. "Come with me. I found the way." Her stomach twisted, her instincts screaming at her to run, but she held her ground. "You're not Sam," she said, her voice firm despite the tremor in it. The thing tilted its head, its smile widening. "Don't be silly, it's me, I'm fine. Just come through the arch. It's safe here." Luke clutched her arm, his grip weak but insistent. "It's lying," he rasped. "The bridge doesn't let you leave, not like this." Ellie didn't need the warning. She could feel the malice radiating from the thing wearing her brother's face. "Where is he?" she demanded, stepping forward. "What did you do to him?" The thing didn't answer. It simply pointed toward the swirling fog beyond the arch. "He's waiting. You can find him, but you have to come through. That's the rule." Ellie's pulse thundered in her ears. "What rule?" "You know the rule," it said, its voice soft and melodic, like a song played in reverse. "One for one, a soul to cross back. It's always been the way." Luke pulled at her arm again, his breathing labored. "Don't listen," he begged. "It's not him, it's the bridge." But Ellie wasn't listening. Her mind was racing, every instinct screaming at her to protect her brothers, to get them both out of this nightmare. She looked at the arch, then back at the creature wearing Sam's face. "I'll stay," she said, the words leaving her mouth before she could think them through. "Take me. Let them go." The thing blinked, its head cocking slightly. For the first time it seemed uncertain. "You can't decide," it said. "The bridge chooses." "Then let it choose," Ellie shouted, her voice cracking. "Just leave them alone." The thing smiled again, slow and deliberate. "You don't understand, do you? It already has." Before Ellie could react, the fog surged forward, swallowing the thing in an instant. The humming grew deafening, vibrating through her skull as the ground seemed to shift beneath her feet. "Ellie!" Luke's voice was distant, his grip slipping as the fog tore him away. The mist closed in, wrapping around her like a shroud. She tried to scream, but the sound was lost in the deafening roar. Images flashed in her mind, Sam's face, hollow and lifeless, Luke's desperate eyes, the bridge stretching endlessly into the void. And then silence. When the fog lifted, Ellie found herself standing alone in the clearing. The stone arch loomed before her, its symbols glowing faintly in the dim light. Beyond it, the path stretched into darkness. "Ellie?" She turned, her heart leaping. Sam stood a few feet away, Luke leaning heavily on him for support. Both of them looked shaken but alive. "You made it," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. But something was wrong. The air was heavy and the ground beneath her felt unsteady. She took a step toward them, but the path seemed to pull away, stretching into the distance. "Ellie," Sam's voice cracked, his face pale. "You're not—" The ground beneath her shifted, and suddenly she understood. She wasn't on the path anymore. She was standing on the bridge. Ellie froze, her breath catching as she looked down. The bridge beneath her feet was cold and slick, its surface gleaming in the pale light filtering through the mist. The carvings etched into the planks writhed, their meaning unknowable but deeply wrong. "Ellie," Sam called, his voice desperate. He and Luke stood on solid ground just beyond the arch, their forms distorted by the swirling fog. "What are you doing? Come on." "I can't," she said, her voice trembling. The realization hit her like a punch to the chest. "It's me. I'm the one who has to stay." "No!" Sam shouted, stepping toward the arch. But the mist recoiled violently, forcing him back. The space beyond the arch seemed to shimmer, a barrier forming between them. Ellie felt the weight of the bridge's choice settle over her like a suffocating blanket. "You can't do this!" Sam screamed, his voice cracking with panic. Luke leaned heavily against his brother, his face pale and stricken. "It's how it works," he murmured. "It's always been this way." Ellie's chest tightened, tears streaming down her face as she looked at her brothers. She'd spent months searching for Luke, holding their family together, refusing to give up. Now the thought of letting them go, of leaving them behind, was unbearable. But she knew there was no other way. "You have to go," she said, her voice firm despite the tears. "Both of you, you have to leave now, before it changes its mind." Sam shook his head violently. "No, I'm not leaving you here." "Sam," she said, her tone softening, "please look after Luke. Look after Mom and Dad. They need you." Her words hit him like a blow, and for a moment he was silent, his fists clenched at his sides. Then he took a shaky step forward, his voice breaking. "Ellie, please, we can figure something out. We can—" "There's no time," she interrupted, her gaze shifting to the mist that swirled hungrily around the bridge. It was closing in, waiting to claim her. She forced a smile, though it felt hollow. "You'll be okay, both of you, I promise." Sam looked like he wanted to argue, but Luke touched his arm, his expression resigned. "We have to go," Luke said quietly. Sam turned to him, disbelief and anguish written all over his face, but eventually he nodded. "Ellie," Sam's voice cracked as he stepped back, pulling Luke with him. "I'm so sorry." She didn't reply. She couldn't. The fog thickened, swallowing the space between them. The last thing Ellie saw was Sam's tear-streaked face and Luke's hollow eyes before they disappeared into the mist. The bridge groaned beneath her, the sound reverberating like a final, echoing sigh. Ellie turned and looked out into the endless fog. She didn't know what awaited her, but she took a deep breath and stepped forward, her feet carrying her into the void. Sam and Luke emerged from the forest just as the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon. The air was crisp and clear, the oppressive fog gone as if it had never existed. They stood in silence, staring at the spot where the bridge should have been. The forest was quiet, peaceful, but to them, it felt hollow. "She saved us," Sam said finally, his voice barely a whisper. Luke nodded, tears streaming silently down his face. They walked back to their car in silence, the weight of their loss pressing down on them. Neither spoke as they drove home, leaving the cursed forest behind. But as they crossed the county line, Sam glanced in the rearview mirror. For a fleeting moment, he thought he saw a figure standing at the edge of the trees watching them. It was Ellie, and then she was gone. Hey Reddit, I've been a lurker here for a while and I've read some pretty wild stories, but I never thought I'd be sharing my own. This happened a couple of years ago, and I'm still dealing with the fallout. If you're thinking about dabbling in the dark web, let my story be a cautionary tale. It all started during one of those sleepless nights. You know the kind, when the house is too quiet and your mind is too loud. I was scrolling through Reddit, reading about the dark web. The more I read, the more intrigued I became. People talked about it like it was this forbidden fruit, a place where you could find anything and everything if you knew where to look. My curiosity got the better of me. I decided to dive in, but I knew I needed to be careful. I'd heard horror stories about people getting caught or scammed. The first step, everyone said, was to get a VPN, a virtual private network, to keep your identity and location hidden. But instead of using a reputable service, I thought I'd be smart and get one from the dark web itself. I figured if anyone knew how to stay hidden, it would be those guys. Navigating to the dark web was easier than I expected. I downloaded Tor, the browser everyone said to use, and within minutes I was in. The sites were strange, a mix of old-school GeoCities pages and the kind of forums you'd see in early 2000s movies. I found a site that sold all kinds of digital tools, hacking software, encryption services, and yes, VPNs. The site promised anonymity, the best encryption, and complete safety. The price was right too, way cheaper than the services I'd seen on the regular web. I made the purchase, paid with Bitcoin to keep things untraceable, and downloaded the VPN software. Installing it was easy. It came with a step-by-step guide that walked me through the process. Once it was up and running, I felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. I was officially anonymous, or so I thought. For the next few days, I explored deeper and deeper into the dark web. I found forums discussing everything from conspiracy theories to obscure books, but nothing too crazy. It was almost mundane. Then things started getting weird. My computer began acting up. Random pop-ups, strange emails, and slow performance. At first, I chalked it up to using the dark web. Maybe my system was just getting bogged down by all the new software. But one night, while browsing, my screen froze and a message appeared. "We know who you are." My heart skipped a beat. I immediately shut down my computer and tried to calm myself. Maybe it was just a prank, I thought. But the next day, I started getting phone calls from unknown numbers. The voices on the other end were distorted, whispering my name, my address, and even my social security number. It was like they were taunting me, letting me know that they had everything. Panic set in. I had trusted the wrong people, and now my personal information was out there for anyone to see. I didn't know what to do. I started researching how to secure my data, but every time I tried to fix something, it felt like I was only making things worse. It was like playing a game of whack-a-mole with my own identity. One night, as I was lying in bed, my phone buzzed. It was an email from an anonymous address. The subject line simply read, You can't hide. I opened it and my heart dropped. The email contained screenshots of my online activity, photos of me taken through my own webcam, and details about my family and friends. I felt violated, scared, and completely out of control. I had no idea how deep this went or who was behind it. All I knew was that I had to get out, and fast. I packed a bag, withdrew all the cash I could from the bank, and decided to leave town. I had no plan, but staying wasn't an option. The next morning I hit the road, hoping to find some sense of safety somewhere far away. Stay tuned for part 2, where I'll dive deeper into my escape and the eerie events that followed. Trust me, if you think this is bad, it only gets worse. As soon as I was on the road, my heart was pounding like a drum. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me, even as I sped through the empty streets of my neighborhood. I didn't have a destination in mind, just a desperate need to get as far away from my old life as possible. I drove for hours, crossing state lines, stopping only for gas and to grab a few bites of food. I kept checking my phone, paranoid that the mysterious emails and calls would start up again. Thankfully, my phone remained silent. It was an eerie kind of silence, the kind that makes you feel like the calm before the storm. I finally stopped at a small run-down motel on the outskirts of a sleepy town. It was the kind of place that didn't ask questions, which was exactly what I needed. I paid in cash and checked into a room that smelled faintly of mildew and cheap air freshener. It wasn't much, but it was safe, at least for the night. That evening, I tried to piece together what had happened. I knew I had to figure out a way to secure my information and protect myself. I spent hours on my laptop, which I had taken great care to scan for any spyware or malware. It seemed clean, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched. As I researched, I came across forums discussing the dark web and the potential dangers of using untrustworthy VPNs. I read horror stories similar to mine, where people's personal information had been stolen and sold to the highest bidder. It was chilling to realize just how deep this went, and how many people were affected by similar scams. In the midst of my frantic research, I heard a noise outside my room. My heart skipped a beat. It was probably just another guest, but in my state of paranoia, every little sound felt like a threat. I peeked through the curtains, seeing nothing but an empty parking lot bathed in the sickly glow of a single street lamp. I tried to sleep that night, but every creak of the motel's aging structure jolted me awake. I kept thinking about those emails, the distorted voices on the phone, and the screenshots of my life. It felt like I was being haunted by my own actions, a constant reminder of my foolish curiosity. The next morning, I decided to keep moving. I couldn't stay in one place for too long. I had no idea who might be tracking me or how close they could be. I packed my things, checked out of the motel, and hit the road again. I made a call to my friend Dan, someone I trusted completely. I didn't go into the full details, but told him I was in trouble and needed a place to stay. Dan lived a few states over, in a small town where everyone knew everyone. I figured it was as good a place as any to lay low for a while. When I arrived at Dan's place, he welcomed me with open arms, no questions asked. It felt good to be around someone I trusted. Over the next few days, I slowly began to explain what had happened. Dan listened intently, his face growing more serious with every detail. "We need to get you off the grid," he said, "at least until we figure out what's going on." Dan helped me set up new bank accounts, get a new phone, and even find a new place to live under a different name. It was like starting over, but with the constant fear that my past could catch up with me at any moment. We spent hours discussing how to secure my information and make sure I was truly anonymous this time. I stayed with Dan for a few weeks, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. I was safe for now, but I knew it wouldn't last forever. One night, as we were having dinner, Dan's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and then looked at me with a worried expression. "It's from an unknown number," he said, handing me the phone. I took a deep breath and answered it. The same distorted voice from before whispered, "You can run." but you can't hide forever. I hung up and stared at the phone, my hands shaking. They had found me again. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. This wasn't over. It might never be over. Stay tuned for part 3, where the tension escalates and I take drastic measures to protect myself and those around me. If you thought this was intense, you haven't seen anything yet. The call left me rattled to my core. If they could find me at Dan's, they could find me anywhere. I couldn't put him or anyone else in danger. That night, as Dan and I sat in his living room, the gravity of the situation sank in. We needed a plan, something more drastic than just moving around and changing my name. We need to figure out who's behind this, Dan said, his voice steady but concerned. You can't keep running forever. He was right. The only way to end this nightmare was to confront it head on. But how? The dark web was a labyrinth of anonymity, and the people I was dealing with were experts at hiding. We decided to dig deeper, to find out who had sold me that VPN, and if there was any way to trace them. I spent the next few days diving back into the dark web, this time with a lot more caution. I used a new, reputable VPN service, one that Dan had personally vetted. Every click, every page felt like I was walking through a minefield, but I was determined. I combed through forums, old transaction logs, and any clue I could find. Slowly, a pattern started to emerge. The VPN I had bought was part of a larger scam run by a group of hackers. They sold fake security software to unsuspecting people like me and then used it to siphon off personal data. The more I read, the more I realized just how sophisticated their operation was. They had multiple aliases, websites that popped up and disappeared overnight, and a network of compromised computers at their disposal. One night I stumbled upon a forum thread where other victims were sharing their experiences. It was eerie reading stories so similar to mine. The panic, the sense of violation, the desperate attempts to escape. One post in particular caught my eye. It was from someone who claimed to have tracked down one of the hackers. According to the post, the hacker operated out of a small town in another state. The details were vague, but it was the first solid lead I had. I shared it with Dan, and we decided it was worth checking out. It felt risky, like walking into the lion's den. But what choice did I have? We packed our bags and hit the road once more, heading towards the town mentioned in the post. It was a quiet place, the kind of town where everyone knew each other and strangers stood out. We checked into a small inn under fake names and started asking around discreetly. Dan was a natural at this, blending in and making casual conversation with the locals. After a few days of subtle probing, we got a break. An older man at a local diner mentioned a reclusive guy who lived on the outskirts of town. He was known for being good with computers, fixing them for people now and then. The description matched the hacker's profile from the forum post. We decided to stake out his place, a rundown house at the end of a dirt road. It was isolated, with overgrown bushes and a dilapidated fence. We parked a distance away and watched from afar, trying to gather any information we could. Hours turned into days, and just as we were starting to lose hope, we saw him. A thin, nervous-looking man in his 30s, constantly looking over his shoulder. One evening, we saw our chance. The man left his house, locking the door behind him and driving off in an old car. We knew we had a limited window of opportunity. Dan and I approached the house, hearts pounding. I felt like I was in a spy movie, but the stakes were all too real. The door was surprisingly easy to pick, something Dan had learned in his youth and never thought he'd use again. Inside, the house was a mess, cluttered with computer parts, cables, and stacks of papers. We quickly made our way to what looked like his main setup, a room filled with monitors and servers humming away. Dan started copying files from the main computer onto a portable hard drive. As he worked, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every creak of the old house made my skin crawl. Just as we were about to leave, I noticed something on one of the monitors, a live feed from a camera pointing at the front door. "He's got cameras," I whispered, my voice trembling. Dan looked up, eyes wide. "We need to go, now." We grabbed the hard drive and bolted, leaving the house as quickly and quietly as we could. Back at the inn, we pored over the files, hoping to find something that could help. Most of it was technical jargon, but there were chat logs, emails, and transaction records. It was enough to piece together the scope of their operation. One email stood out. It was from someone higher up, giving orders and discussing payments. It included a username we hadn't seen before, a potential ringleader. This was the break we needed, but it also meant we were in deeper than ever. Stay tuned for Part 4, where we confront the ringleader and the situation takes a turn for the unexpected. If you think it's been intense so far, hold on tight. The real nightmare is just beginning. Back at the inn, we scrutinized every detail from the files we had taken. The username mentioned in the emails was Shadow Master, a fitting name for someone operating in the darkest corners of the web. But who was Shadow Master, and how could we find them? Dan and I spent the next few days trying to trace the username through various online platforms and forums. It was like looking for a needle in a haystack, but persistence paid off. We found a thread on a deep web forum where Shadow Master was highly active, often boasting about their exploits and giving advice to other hackers. One particular post caught our attention. Shadow Master was planning a meetup for a select group of hackers, a sort of underground conference where they could share techniques and collaborate on projects. The location? A remote cabin in the mountains, only accessible through specific coordinates and a coded message for entry. We knew it was risky, but this was our best shot at confronting the person behind all my troubles. Dan and I prepared meticulously. We gathered all the equipment we'd need: cameras, recording devices, and secure means of communication. This time, we wouldn't be caught off guard. The journey to the cabin was nerve-wracking. We followed winding mountain roads, double-checking the coordinates and instructions we had deciphered from the forum. As we neared the location, the dense forest seemed to close in around us, adding to the sense of impending danger. We parked a distance away and continued on foot, trying to stay as silent as possible. The cabin came into view, a rustic structure nestled among tall pines. Lights flickered inside, and the murmur of voices reached us. We found a good vantage point where we could observe without being seen. It was like something out of a spy thriller. Hackers of all shapes and sizes milled about, discussing their latest projects and sharing tips. At the center of it all was Shadow Master, a tall figure with an aura of authority. They wore a hooded jacket, and their face was obscured by a mask, the perfect disguise for someone who thrived on anonymity. We waited until the gathering started to wind down, and the hackers began to disperse. Shadow Master stayed behind, tidying up and checking their devices. This was our moment. Dan and I approached cautiously, our hearts pounding. "Shadow Master," I called out, my voice steady despite my nerves. They turned, startled, and reached for something inside their jacket. Dan quickly raised his hand, showing we meant no harm. "We need to talk," he said. "We know what you've been doing, and we have proof." Shadow Master hesitated, then slowly lowered their hand. "Who are you?" they asked, their voice distorted by a voice changer. "We're victims," I replied. "You sold us a fake VPN and exposed our personal information. We've been living in fear ever since." There was a moment of silence, then Shadow Master removed their mask. The face that greeted us was not what I expected. Young, maybe mid-20s, with piercing eyes that seemed to see right through me. "You're not the first," they said, almost with a hint of regret. "And you won't be the last. But why come here? What do you want?" "We want this to stop," Dan said firmly. "Not just for us, but for everyone you've scammed. You have to shut this operation down." Shadow Master laughed, a hollow sound. "You think it's that simple? This isn't just about money. It's about power, control. People are willing to pay for the illusion of safety. I just give them what they want. You're ruining lives, I countered. We have enough evidence to bring you down. Help us stop this, and maybe we can work something out. For a moment, Shadowmaster seemed to consider our words. Then they sighed. All right, I can shut down this operation, but you need to understand. This is bigger than me. There are others, and they won't be as accommodating. Dan and I exchanged a look, a silent agreement passing between us. We knew this was just the beginning, but it was a start. Shadowmaster handed over a drive with all the information we needed to dismantle the scam network. As we left the cabin, the weight of our actions settled on us. We had taken a big step, but the road ahead was still uncertain. Stay tuned for Part 5, where we face the final challenges and reveal how this ordeal ultimately changed our lives. If you think the stakes have been high, the final chapter will show you just how far we've come. Leaving the cabin with the drive from Shadowmaster felt like we had finally gained the upper hand. As we descended the mountain, Dan and I knew the next steps would be crucial. We had to make sure this information reached the right people, and that meant going to the authorities. Back in the safety of our temporary hideout, we pored over the data on the drive. It was a treasure trove of incriminating evidence, detailed logs of transactions, lists of victims, and communication records between Shadowmaster and their associates. With this, we had enough to shut down their operation and protect countless others from falling into the same trap I had. The next morning, we contacted a cybercrime division of the federal government. We explained our situation, handed over the evidence, and shared everything we knew about the scam. The agents we spoke to were professional and sympathetic. They assured us that they would act swiftly to dismantle the network and pursue the culprits. The following weeks were a blur of interviews and statements. We remained on edge, but the authorities kept us updated on their progress. Slowly but surely, they started making arrests, taking down key members of the scam operation. Shadowmaster had kept their word and cooperated, providing vital information that led to the network's downfall. One evening, as Dan and I sat in his living room, we received a call from the lead investigator. "We've done it," he said. "The network is dismantled, and many of the perpetrators are in custody. You've helped save a lot of people from going through what you did." A wave of relief washed over me. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The nightmare that had started with a reckless decision on the dark web was finally coming to an end. But the journey wasn't over yet. I knew I couldn't go back to my old life, not entirely. The experience had changed me. I decided to move to a new city, start fresh under a new identity. Dan, ever the supportive friend, helped me with the transition. We found a quiet apartment in a safe neighborhood far from the chaos I had left behind. I took up a job that kept me off the grid, working at a local library, surrounded by books and the peaceful hum of daily life. It was a stark contrast to the turmoil I had faced, and it was exactly what I needed to heal. In the months that followed, I rebuilt my life piece by piece. I made new friends, slowly opened up about my past, and found solace in the simple routines of my new existence. I never went near the dark web again, and I made it my mission to warn others about the dangers lurking in its shadows. Dan and I remained close, our bond stronger than ever after what we had been through. We often talked about our adventure, the lessons we had learned, and the importance of staying vigilant in an increasingly digital world. One day I decided to share my story on Reddit. I wanted others to know the reality of the dark web, the scams, and the risks. Writing it all down was cathartic, a way to process everything that had happened. I hoped that by sharing my experience, I could prevent others from making the same mistakes. The response was overwhelming. People thanked me for the warning, shared their own stories, and offered support. It felt good to connect with others and to know that my story had made a difference. Looking back, I realized how much I had grown. The ordeal had tested me in ways I never thought possible, but it had also made me stronger, more cautious, and more appreciative of the simple, safe life I now led. So if you're reading this and thinking about exploring the dark web, please take my advice. Don't. The risks far outweigh the curiosity. Stay safe, protect your information, and remember that some doors are better left unopened. Thanks for sticking with me through this journey. Stay safe out there, Reddit. Alright, so here's the deal. I've always been fascinated by the weird and unexplained, like those late-night ghost stories on YouTube or creepy Reddit threads. My interest escalated when I stumbled upon the concept of mystery boxes from the dark web. I know, it's stupid. But curiosity got the better of me, and one late night I decided to dive in. Finding the dark web was surprisingly easy. With a bit of searching, I installed Tor, the browser everyone warns you about. I followed all the usual safety precautions, masking my IP and all that, and soon enough, I was scrolling through endless lists of mystery boxes. They ranged from the mundane to the outright bizarre, with descriptions promising anything from vintage collectibles to cursed objects. The one that caught my eye was labeled simply as the ultimate mystery. The description was vague, something about it containing secrets that could change your life. It was pricier than most, but the anonymity of Bitcoin made the purchase seem almost unreal. I clicked buy, filled out the necessary details, and just like that, it was done. My heart pounded as I closed my laptop, wondering if I'd just thrown away a chunk of money for nothing. Days turned into weeks, and I almost forgot about the whole thing. Then, one afternoon, a nondescript package arrived at my doorstep. There was no return address, just my name and address scrawled in messy handwriting. I brought it inside, my hands trembling with a mix of excitement and dread. The box itself was unremarkable, plain brown cardboard sealed with ordinary packing tape. I grabbed a pair of scissors and carefully cut it open, half expecting to find some cheap trinkets or maybe a creepy doll. Instead, there was just a stack of old yellowed papers tied together with twine. Confused, I untied the bundle and began to read. The first few pages seemed like random gibberish, nonsensical phrases and jumbled letters. But as I kept reading, my blood ran cold. The words started to make sense, and they were describing things that only I knew. Deep, personal secrets that I had never shared with anyone. I remember the first secret clearly. It was about the time I accidentally broke my mom's favorite vase when I was 8. I had lied and blamed it on the cat, and no one had ever found out. I flipped to the next page, which recounted the time I cheated on a math test in high school. These were things I'd buried deep, memories I'd convinced myself didn't matter. With each page, the secrets got darker, more personal. There was a detailed account of the night I got drunk and crashed my car into a tree, a secret I'd kept even from my closest friends. I felt nauseous as I read on, my hands shaking uncontrollably. How could anyone know these things? I had never told a soul, and yet here they were, written out in chilling detail. The last page was the worst. It described a recurring nightmare I'd had for years, one I'd never spoken about. In the dream, I was always running through a dark forest, chased by an unseen figure. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, heart pounding, but I'd never told anyone about it, not a single person. I dropped the papers, backing away from the box as if it were a live bomb. My mind raced with questions and fears. Who could have done this? How did they know so much about me? And what did they want? I felt exposed, violated, like someone had reached into the deepest corners of my mind and laid it bare for all to see. I needed answers, but I had no idea where to start. My mind was a whirl of paranoia and fear. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? That someone had sent me a box of paper? It sounded ridiculous even to me. The rest of the day was a blur. I couldn't concentrate on anything. I kept checking my phone, half expecting another message or some sign that someone was watching me. That night, sleep was out of the question. Every creak of the house made me jump. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. I knew I had to figure out what was going on, but I had no idea how. All I knew was that my life had taken a terrifying turn, and there was no going back. The mystery box had opened a door to something dark and unknown, and I was standing right in its path. The morning after receiving the box, I felt like a zombie. Sleep had evaded me, leaving me with a pounding headache and a heavy sense of dread. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me, even in the daylight. Every car that drove by, every pedestrian that walked past my house seemed suspicious. I decided I needed to get out of the house. Maybe a change of scenery would help clear my mind. I grabbed my laptop and headed to a local coffee shop, hoping the bustling atmosphere would drown out my paranoia. I found a quiet corner and set up my laptop, determined to find some answers. First, I tried searching for any information about the mystery box. There were countless stories and videos about people ordering strange items from the dark web, but nothing that matched my experience. Most were just urban legends or hoaxes, people trying to scare others for views and clicks. My frustration grew as I sifted through page after page of irrelevant content. I took a deep breath and decided to try a different approach. I thought back to the box itself, focusing on the details. The handwriting on the package was messy, almost as if the sender was in a hurry. It struck me as odd that someone who knew so much about me would be so careless with their presentation. Perhaps it was a clue. I posted a thread on Reddit, detailing my experience in hopes that someone might have a lead. The responses were a mix of skepticism, concern, and curiosity. Some users suggested it was an elaborate prank, while others speculated about more sinister possibilities. Amidst the noise, one comment stood out. A user named Hidden Truth Seeker claimed to have had a similar experience and offered to help. We moved the conversation to private messages. Hidden Truth Seeker told me about their own encounter with a mystery box, describing eerie similarities to mine. They had also received a package containing personal secrets, ones they thought were buried. Their box, however, had included a USB drive with a single file on it, a video. I watched the video they sent me. It was grainy and poorly lit, showing a room cluttered with papers and strange artifacts. A masked figure appeared on screen, speaking in a distorted voice. They warned the viewer that the secrets were just the beginning, and that failure to comply with their demands would lead to more exposure. Hidden Truth Seeker hadn't mentioned any demands in their messages, which worried me even more. I thanked them and logged off, feeling a mixture of relief and dread. At least I wasn't alone in this, but the mention of demands made my stomach churn. What if my box was just the start of something more? I decided to examine the papers again, this time looking for any hidden clues. I spread the pages out on my living room floor, scrutinizing each one for anything I might have missed. It was then that I noticed something odd. The edges of some papers had tiny, almost invisible markings. Numbers, letters, and symbols. They seemed random at first, but I had a gut feeling they were important. Hours passed as I tried to decode the markings. I felt like a detective in a crime thriller, piecing together fragments of a larger puzzle. Eventually, a pattern emerged. The symbols corresponded to dates, places, and names. Places I'd been, names I'd encountered, but nothing connected to the current situation. Just when I was about to give up, I found a sequence that stood out. My birthday, followed by the word park. It made no sense at first, but then I remembered. On my birthday last year, I had visited a local park, one I rarely went to. The memory was foggy, but I recalled sitting on a bench near the lake, lost in thought. With a newfound sense of purpose, I decided to visit the park. Maybe there was something there, something I missed. As I drove, the city seemed quieter than usual, as if the world was holding its breath. The park was nearly empty, just a few joggers and an elderly couple feeding the ducks. I walked to the bench by the lake and sat down, trying to recall the details of that day. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. I scanned the area, looking for anything that might stand out. My eyes fell on a tree nearby with initials carved into the trunk. I hadn't noticed it before, but now it seemed significant. I approached the tree and ran my fingers over the carvings. They were old, weathered by time. But among the initials there was a fresh carving, barely noticeable, a series of numbers. It looked like a phone number. My heart raced as I copied it down. Could this be the key to unlocking the mystery? Back home, I stared at the number, debating whether to call it. It felt like stepping into deeper waters, but my curiosity won out. I dialed the number, my hands trembling. The phone rang once, twice, then a click. A voice, distorted and eerie, answered. "You found the first clue. Your secrets are just the beginning. Follow the trail or face the consequences." The line went dead before I could respond. I sat there, phone in hand, feeling more isolated and frightened than ever. This was no prank. Someone was playing a twisted game with my life, and I was caught in the middle. The only way out was to follow the clues, wherever they might lead. The voice on the phone haunted me for days. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that every move I made was under scrutiny. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, jumping at the slightest sound. My paranoia was consuming me, but I knew I had to keep going. The phone call had mentioned a trail, and I needed to find the next clue. The number carved into the tree had led me to the mysterious phone call, so I figured the next clue might be hidden in a similar way. I started revisiting places that held significant memories for me, hoping to find something, anything, that would point me in the right direction. My first stop was my old high school. It was a place filled with memories, both good and bad. I wandered through the empty halls, feeling a strange mix of nostalgia and unease. Everything looked the same, yet different, as if it had been frozen in time. I checked every locker, every classroom, but found nothing unusual. Next, I visited the house I grew up in. My parents had moved out years ago, but the new owners were kind enough to let me look around after I explained I was retracing old memories for a personal project. I scoured the basement, the attic, even the backyard, but again I found nothing out of the ordinary. Frustration was building. I was missing something, but what? I decided to take a break and clear my head. I returned home, flopping onto the couch with a heavy sigh. As I stared at the ceiling, my mind wandered back to the box and the papers. I had been so focused on the written secrets that I hadn't paid much attention to the box itself. I retrieved the box from the closet and inspected it closely. The cardboard was plain, but the inside had faint marks, like something had been dragged across it. At the bottom of the box, hidden in the seam, was a small slip of paper. My heart skipped a beat as I carefully unfolded it. The paper had a single line of text. "Look where the memories were framed." I stared at it, puzzled. Memories framed. It clicked suddenly. The photo albums. I had several photo albums filled with pictures from different stages of my life. They were in a box under my bed, collecting dust. I pulled out the albums and began flipping through them. Most of the photos were typical family snapshots, vacations, birthdays, and holidays. But as I reached the album from my college years, something caught my eye. Tucked between the pages was another slip of paper, similar to the first one. This note was more detailed. "Remember the night under the stars where secrets were whispered." I immediately knew what it referred to. During my sophomore year of college, my friends and I had gone camping at a nearby state park. One night we had stayed up late, sharing our deepest secrets under the starlit sky. It was a night of bonding and trust, one I remembered fondly. I drove to the state park, the memory of that night vivid in my mind. It was a place of solace and beauty, far removed from the chaos of my current situation. I hiked to the spot where we had camped, the clearing still as serene as I remembered. I stood there, looking around, trying to recall every detail of that night. It was then I noticed a small metal box, half buried in the ground near the fire pit we had used. My pulse quickened as I dug it out. The box was locked, but a tiny key was taped to the underside. With trembling hands, I unlocked it and opened the lid. Inside was a USB drive and a note. The note read, "The truth lies within. Be prepared." My hands shook as I pocketed the drive and made my way back to my car, my mind racing with possibilities. What could be on the drive? More secrets? Answers? Back home, I plugged the USB drive into my laptop. A single file appeared on the screen. A video file named Watch Me MP4. I hesitated for a moment, then double-clicked it. The screen flickered to life, showing a dimly lit room. A figure, masked and cloaked, stood in the center. The figure spoke in the same distorted voice from the phone call. Congratulations on finding this clue. You are resourceful, but your journey is far from over. Your secrets are just the beginning. Each clue will bring you closer to the truth and to the one who knows you better than you know yourself. The figure stepped aside, revealing a table with more papers, similar to the ones I had received in the initial box. These papers hold the next piece of the puzzle. Find them, and you will find me. Ignore this at your peril. The video ended abruptly, leaving me staring at the blank screen. I felt a chill run down my spine. The game was far from over, and the stakes were higher than ever. Someone out there knew me intimately, and they were leading me on a twisted journey of self-discovery and fear. I knew I couldn't back down now. I had to see this through, no matter where it led. My secrets were out there, and the only way to reclaim my peace was to follow the trail, uncover the truth, and confront whoever was behind this sinister game. The video's ominous message left me rattled, but I was more determined than ever to uncover the truth. The masked figure had mentioned that the next set of papers held another piece of the puzzle. I needed to figure out where to look next. The video provided no specific instructions, just the chilling reminder that someone out there knew my darkest secrets. I replayed the video several times, looking for any hidden clues. The room where the figure stood was dimly lit, but I could make out a few details. There were bookshelves lining the walls, filled with old dusty books, and a large ornate mirror in the background. Something about the mirror seemed familiar, but I couldn't place it. I decided to revisit the first set of papers. Maybe there was something I had missed, some hint that would point me in the right direction. As I laid the papers out on the table, I noticed a recurring symbol in the margins, an intricate, looping design that looked almost like a signature. It reminded me of something I had seen before. It hit me suddenly, my old university library. There was a rare book room that had similar designs on the spines of ancient books. The memory was faint, but it was a lead. I grabbed my car keys and headed to the university, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and anticipation. The campus was quiet, the summer break leaving it almost deserted. I made my way to the library, the familiar smell of old books and wood polish bringing back a wave of nostalgia. The rare book room was at the back, a small, secluded area filled with antique books and manuscripts. I pushed open the heavy wooden door and stepped inside. The room was just as I remembered, dimly lit, with rows of ancient books and a large, ornate mirror at the far end. My eyes widened as I realized it was the same mirror from the video. I approached the mirror, examining it closely. It was an old gilded piece with intricate carvings. As I ran my fingers along the edge, I felt a slight give. The mirror swung open like a door, revealing a hidden compartment behind it. Inside was a single envelope sealed with the same looping symbol from the papers. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside was another note and a small key. The note read, "The final truth awaits. Follow the path you once walked with those you trusted most. The key will unlock what you seek." I knew exactly what it meant. During my senior year, my friends and I had discovered an old abandoned house on the outskirts of town. We had explored it for fun, sharing ghost stories and daring each other to venture into its dark corners. It was a place filled with both fear and laughter, a final adventure before we all went our separate ways. I drove to the house, memories flooding back with every mile. The house stood at the end of a long, overgrown driveway, its once grand facade now crumbling and covered in ivy. I parked and walked up to the front door, the key in my hand feeling like a lead weight. The key fit perfectly into the old, rusty lock. The door creaked open, revealing the dusty, cobweb-filled interior. The air was thick with the smell of decay and neglect. I stepped inside, my footsteps echoing in the empty hallways. I made my way to the room we had used as our base of operations, a large sunlit room with tall windows and a fireplace. There, on the mantel, was another envelope, identical to the one from the library. I opened it, my heart pounding. Inside was a final note. You have done well to come this far. The truth you seek is not just about your secrets, but about who has been watching you all this time. Return home, and all will be revealed. The note was signed with the same looping symbol. I felt a mix of relief and dread. The end was near, but what awaited me at home? I hurried back to my car and drove home, the anticipation growing with every passing minute. When I arrived, I found another envelope taped to my front door. I ripped it open, finding a single piece of paper with an address and the words, "Come alone, midnight." The address was familiar. It was an old warehouse downtown, a place I had passed by countless times but never paid much attention to. As midnight approached, I prepared myself for whatever awaited me. I packed a flashlight, my phone, and a pocket knife, just in case. I arrived at the warehouse a few minutes before midnight, the building looming ominously in the darkness. I pushed open the heavy door and stepped inside. The warehouse was dark, the only light coming from a single flickering bulb in the center of the room. In the circle of light stood a figure, masked and cloaked, just like in the video. The figure spoke, the voice still distorted but now tinged with a hint of familiarity. "Welcome. You have done well to follow the trail. Now the final truth will be revealed." The figure removed the mask, and my heart skipped a beat. It was my old friend from college, Mark. We had lost touch over the years, but why was he doing this? "Mark, what is this? Why are you doing this?" I demanded, a mix of confusion and anger boiling inside me. Mark smiled, a strange, almost sad smile. "I'm sorry, but it was necessary. You needed to see the truth to understand the importance of the secrets we keep and the ones we share. You were always the one who held everything inside, never letting anyone in. This was the only way to make you see." I was speechless, the realization hitting me like a ton of bricks. This entire ordeal, the fear, the paranoia, it was all orchestrated by someone I once trusted. But why? "You could have just talked to me," I said, my voice trembling. "I tried," Mark replied, his expression sincere. "But you were always so guarded. I needed to show you that it's okay to be vulnerable, to share your burdens. We all have secrets, but they don't have to control us." I didn't know whether to feel relieved or betrayed. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Mark approached and handed me a final envelope. "Open it," he said. Inside was a letter written in Mark's familiar handwriting. It was a heartfelt apology and an explanation of his actions. He had seen me struggling, had watched as I isolated myself, and had concocted this elaborate plan to force me to confront my fears. I looked up at Mark, still unsure how to feel. But one thing was clear. This journey had changed me. I had faced my deepest fears and come out the other side stronger. Mark's methods were extreme, but in a twisted way, they had worked. As we left the warehouse, the weight of my secrets felt a little lighter. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't walking it alone. The ride home from the warehouse was silent, both Mark and I lost in our thoughts. The revelation that my old friend had orchestrated the entire ordeal left me conflicted, but it also brought a strange sense of closure. Despite the unconventional methods, Mark had achieved his goal, forcing me to confront my deepest secrets and fears. Back at my house, we sat in the living room, the atmosphere heavy with unspoken words. Mark finally broke the silence, his voice calm but sincere. "I know you probably hate me right now, and I don't blame you, but I did what I thought was necessary to help you. You're my friend, and I couldn't stand seeing you suffer alone." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I don't hate you, Mark. I'm just overwhelmed. This whole experience has been a lot to process. but I get it. You were trying to help in your own way." We talked long into the night, sharing memories and catching up on lost time. It felt good to reconnect, to let down the walls I had built around myself. Mark explained how he had pieced together my secrets over the years, through casual conversations and subtle observations. He had noticed the changes in my behavior, the way I withdrew from people, and had decided to intervene before it was too late. As dawn approached, Mark handed me one last envelope. "This is the final piece," he said. "It's something I've been holding on to for a while, waiting for the right moment to give it to you." I opened the envelope, finding a photograph and a letter inside. The photo was of our group of friends from college, taken on that camping trip where we had shared our secrets under the stars. We were all smiling, carefree and happy. The letter was from another friend, Sarah, who had moved away after graduation. She had written about how much she missed our group and how those moments had meant the world to her. Reading Sarah's letter brought a lump to my throat. It reminded me of the importance of those connections, of the people who had been there for me even when I had shut them out. I realized that I had been so focused on hiding my secrets that I had forgotten how to let others in. Mark and I spent the next few weeks rebuilding our friendship, reaching out to old friends and rekindling those bonds. The fear and paranoia that had plagued me began to fade, replaced by a sense of belonging and support. I started seeing a therapist, working through my issues and learning to open up in healthier ways. The experience with the mystery box had changed me profoundly. It had been a dark and twisted journey, but it had also led me to a place of understanding and acceptance. I learned that my secrets didn't have to define me, and that sharing my burdens made them easier to bear. One evening, as the sun set, Mark and I sat on my porch, watching the sky turn shades of orange and pink. The air was warm, the world peaceful. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for everything. I don't think I could have made it through without you." Mark smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile. "We're in this together, always. No more secrets, right?" "Right," I agreed, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. Life slowly returned to normal, but with a renewed sense of purpose. I made a conscious effort to stay connected with my friends, to be there for them as they had been for me. The mystery box had been a catalyst for change, a strange and unsettling journey that ultimately led to healing. As I moved forward, I kept the lessons I had learned close to my heart. I understood the value of vulnerability, the strength in sharing our deepest fears and secrets with those we trust. The darkness that once overshadowed my life was now a distant memory, replaced by the light of friendship and understanding. And so, the mystery box became a symbol of transformation, a reminder that even in our darkest moments, there is always a path to redemption and hope. I had faced my fears, uncovered the truth, and found a way to move forward stronger and more connected than ever before. Hey Reddit, I've always been a bit of an internet junkie, spending countless hours exploring the depths of the web. It started innocently enough, watching funny videos, reading blogs, and occasionally diving into the mysteries of Reddit. But one night, curiosity got the better of me, and I ventured into the dark web. I had heard all the horror stories, but I was convinced that most of it was just exaggerated. I was wrong. It was a rainy Saturday night, and I had nothing better to do. I had my laptop open, a cup of coffee by my side, and my mind set on finding something interesting. I had been browsing for a couple of hours, sifting through various forums and marketplaces, when I stumbled upon a thread that caught my eye. Secrets of Death Revealed by a Man Who Came Back. The title was bizarre and immediately grabbed my attention. The thread was buried deep within a forum dedicated to paranormal and unexplainable phenomena. The original poster, who went by the username Back From Beyond, claimed to be a former researcher who had died, only to come back with knowledge of what lies beyond death. It sounded too outrageous to be true, but the comments were filled with people sharing their experiences and asking questions. I decided to dig deeper. The thread had been started a few months ago, but Back from Beyond was still actively responding to comments. His posts were detailed and articulate, often referencing scientific theories and philosophical concepts that were way over my head. But there was something unsettling about his words. He spoke with an eerie certainty, as if he had truly seen what awaited us after death. One comment in particular caught my eye. A user had asked, "How did you come back, and what did you see?" Back from Beyond's response was chilling. I was conducting research on near-death experiences when I suffered a cardiac arrest. I was clinically dead for 7 minutes. In that time, I found myself in a place that defies description, a void, yet filled with an overwhelming sense of presence. I encountered entities, beings that exist beyond our comprehension. They showed me glimpses of humanity's fate, secrets that would drive most to madness. When I was revived, I brought back knowledge that haunts me to this day. Death is not the end, but a doorway to a reality far more complex and terrifying than we can imagine. I felt a shiver run down my spine. It was like reading a horror novel, but this felt real. The more I read, the more I felt an inexplicable connection to his words. It was as if he was speaking directly to me, revealing secrets that no one should know. I decided to message him directly. "Hey, I'm really intrigued by your story. Can you tell me more about what you saw and learned?" I typed, my hands shaking slightly. I didn't expect a response right away, but within minutes I received a reply. "I was hoping you'd reach out," he wrote. "There's so much to share, but it's not something that can be easily explained in a single message. If you're truly interested, I can guide you through what I experienced. But be warned, once you know these secrets, there's no going back." I hesitated. This was way beyond anything I had encountered before, but my curiosity was insatiable. I had to know more. "Yes, I'm interested. Please tell me everything," I replied, trying to keep my composure. He responded with a series of cryptic instructions, directing me to a secure chat platform on the dark web. It was a place where anonymity was guaranteed, and our conversations would be safe from prying eyes. I followed his instructions, my heart pounding in my chest. When I finally connected with him, his first message was simple but foreboding. "Welcome to the other side. Prepare yourself for the truth about death." Over the next few hours, we chatted extensively. He shared his experiences in more detail, describing the entities he encountered and the knowledge they imparted. According to him, death was not a void, but a transition to a different plane of existence. The entities he met were guardians of this realm, and they had a vested interest in the fate of humanity. They revealed that our world was on the brink of a great upheaval, and only those who understood the truth about death would be prepared. As our conversation went on, I felt a growing sense of dread. His words were like pieces of a puzzle, slowly coming together to form a terrifying picture. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was getting involved in something far beyond my understanding. When we finally said goodbye for the night, I closed my laptop and sat in silence. The rain was still pattering against the window, and the room felt colder than before. I knew I had only scratched the surface of Back from Beyond's story, and I couldn't wait to learn more. But a part of me wondered if I had made a mistake. Some secrets are meant to stay buried, and I was about to unearth something that could change my life forever. Hey Reddit. I spent the next day in a fog, unable to shake the eerie feeling from my conversation with Back from Beyond. His words haunted me, and I kept replaying them in my mind. I knew I had to continue our chat, despite the growing sense of unease. The promise of uncovering the secrets of death was too compelling to ignore. That evening, I logged back into the secure chat platform. Back from Beyond was already online, as if he had been waiting for me. "Good to see you again," he messaged. "I hope you're ready for what comes next." "Ready as I'll ever be," I replied, trying to sound confident. He began by explaining more about the entities he encountered during his near-death experience. According to him, these beings were not angels or demons, but something entirely different, guardians of knowledge and truth. They existed in a realm beyond our physical world, a place where time and space did not function as we understand them. They showed me visions, he wrote, glimpses of humanity's past, present, and future. The things I saw, they were both wondrous and terrifying. I leaned forward, my eyes glued to the screen. "Can you describe one of these visions?" I asked. He paused for a moment before responding. One vision stood out above the rest. It was of a great gathering of souls, each one representing a person who had died throughout history. They were all interconnected by a vast web of energy, pulsating with a life of its own. The entities explained that this web was the collective consciousness of humanity, a repository of all our experiences, emotions, and knowledge. As he described the vision, I could almost see it in my mind's eye, a sprawling network of glowing threads, each one a lifeline connecting countless souls. It was both beautiful and unsettling, a reminder of our interconnectedness and the vastness of existence beyond death. "But there's more," he continued. "The entities warned me that this web was in danger. They showed me shadows creeping along the threads, threatening to unravel the entire network. These shadows represented the darkest aspects of human nature: greed, hatred, and fear. If left unchecked, they would corrupt the web and plunge humanity into chaos." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Is there anything we can do to stop it?" I typed, my fingers trembling. "Yes," he replied. "The entities believe that knowledge is the key. By understanding the truth about death and our place in the universe, we can combat the darkness and preserve the integrity of the web. That's why I'm sharing this with you. You have a role to play in this as well." His words filled me with a sense of purpose, but also a heavy burden. I had never considered myself to be particularly important, but now it seemed I had been chosen for something far greater than I could have imagined. "How can I help?" I asked, determined to make a difference. "Spread the knowledge," he wrote. "Share what you've learned with others, but do so carefully. Not everyone is ready to hear the truth, and it could cause panic if revealed recklessly. Start with those you trust, and let the knowledge grow organically. Together, we can push back the shadows and protect the web." I nodded to myself, feeling a newfound resolve. "I'll do my best," I promised. Over the next few days, our conversations continued. Back from Beyond shared more of his visions, each one revealing a different aspect of the afterlife and the entity's warnings. He described a realm where souls went to heal from the traumas of their earthly lives, guided by benevolent beings who helped them find peace. He spoke of a place of endless light and knowledge, where the secrets of the universe were laid bare for those who sought them. Despite the disturbing nature of some of these visions, there was also a sense of hope. The afterlife was not a place of eternal torment, but a complex and multifaceted existence where souls could continue to grow and evolve. The entities were not malevolent, but guardians who cared deeply about the fate of humanity. As I absorbed this knowledge, I began to see the world around me in a new light. Everyday interactions took on a deeper significance, and I felt a stronger connection to the people in my life. I started sharing bits and pieces of what I had learned with close friends, carefully choosing my words to avoid overwhelming them. To my surprise, many were receptive and curious, eager to learn more. One evening, as I was about to log off, Back from Beyond sent me a final message for the night. "Remember, this is just the beginning," he wrote. "There's so much more to discover, and our journey is far from over. Be vigilant and trust in the knowledge you've gained. Together, we can make a difference." I logged off, feeling a strange mix of exhilaration and apprehension. The secrets of death were no longer just a mystery. They were a part of my reality. And as I lay in bed that night, I couldn't help but wonder what other revelations awaited me in the days to come. Hey Reddit, my conversations with Back from Beyond had become a regular part of my routine. Each night I would log into the secure chat platform, eager to uncover more of the secrets he had to share. It was like unraveling a complex and fascinating mystery, one piece at a time. One night he started our chat with a message that immediately caught my attention. "Tonight I need to tell you about a place called the Hall of Echoes," he wrote. "It's one of the most important aspects of the afterlife that the entities showed me." I felt a surge of curiosity. "What is the Hall of Echoes?" I asked. "The Hall of Echoes is a vast ethereal library that exists beyond our physical realm," he explained. "It's a repository of every thought, memory, and experience of every soul that has ever lived. The entities call it the collective memory of humanity. It's a place where souls can revisit their past lives, learn from their experiences, and gain wisdom." I was fascinated by the idea. A library that contained the sum total of human experience sounded like something out of a fantasy novel. Yet, Back from Beyond spoke of it with such certainty that it felt real. "The Hall of Echoes is not just a static archive," he continued. "It's alive, constantly growing and evolving as new souls enter the afterlife and contribute their memories. The entities act as custodians, guiding souls to the knowledge they seek and helping them find peace and understanding." "Can you describe what it looks like?" I asked, trying to visualize this extraordinary place. He paused for a moment before responding. "It's hard to put into words, but I'll try. Imagine a vast, endless hall filled with towering shelves of shimmering light. Each book is a memory, glowing with an inner radiance. The air is filled with a gentle hum, the echoes of countless voices sharing their stories. As you walk through the hall, the memories come to life, enveloping you in vivid, immersive experiences." I closed my eyes, trying to picture it. The image that formed in my mind was both beautiful and awe-inspiring. It was a place where the past and present merged, where every soul's journey was honored and preserved. "But the Hall of Echoes is more than just a place to learn about the past," he added. "It's also a place of healing. Souls who have suffered greatly in life can find solace there, revisiting their memories and gaining new perspectives. The entities help them understand their experiences and guide them toward forgiveness and peace." I felt a deep sense of wonder and empathy. "It sounds like a place of incredible beauty and compassion," I wrote. "It is," he replied. "But there's a darker side to it as well. The entities showed me that not all souls find peace easily. Some are haunted by their actions in life, unable to let go of their guilt and regrets. These souls wander the hall, lost and tormented, reliving their darkest moments. The entities do their best to help them, but some wounds are slow to heal. The thought of souls trapped in their own torment was heartbreaking." "Is there anything we can do to help them?" I asked, feeling a sense of urgency. "Yes," he replied. "That's part of why I'm sharing this with you. By spreading knowledge and compassion in our world, we can help prevent souls from becoming lost in the afterlife. The entities believe that by fostering understanding and empathy in life, we can create a ripple effect that extends beyond death." His words resonated deeply with me. It was a call to action, a reminder that our actions in life have far-reaching consequences. As our conversation continued, Back from Beyond shared more stories of the souls he had encountered in the Hall of Echoes. He spoke of a soldier who had found peace by revisiting his memories of bravery and sacrifice, and a mother who had reunited with her lost child, finding solace in their shared love. These stories were both heartbreaking and uplifting, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. By the end of the night, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the knowledge I had gained. The Hall of Echoes was a place of both pain and healing, a reflection of the complexities of human existence. And as I logged off, I knew that my journey was far from over. There were still many secrets to uncover, many more truths to learn. The next day, I started sharing what I had learned with a few more close friends. Their reactions were a mix of fascination and skepticism, but most were intrigued. The idea that our lives had a greater purpose, that our experiences were part of a larger tapestry, resonated with them. Slowly but surely, the knowledge was spreading. That night, I logged back into the chat, eager for more. Back from Beyond was waiting, as always. "There's something else you need to know," he wrote. "The entities have a message for humanity, a warning about the future. It's time for you to hear it." My heart raced with anticipation. I had no idea what he was about to reveal, but I knew it would be important. "Tell me," I replied, ready for whatever came next. Hey Reddit. By now, my nightly chats with Back from Beyond had become a fixture in my life. Each session brought new revelations, and I was eager to hear what he had to say about the entity's warning. I logged into the secure chat platform, my heart pounding with anticipation. "You're ready for the next step," he messaged. "What I'm about to tell you is crucial for the future of humanity." I took a deep breath. "I'm ready," I replied. "The entities have shown me that humanity is at a crossroads," he began. "Our actions in the coming years will determine our fate. The web of interconnected souls, the Hall of Echoes, and even the balance of the afterlife are all influenced by the choices we make in the physical world." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What kind of choices?" I asked. "The entities have identified 3 key areas where our actions will have the greatest impact," he wrote. "First, our relationship with technology. Second, our treatment of the environment. And third, our approach to empathy and understanding among ourselves." I was intrigued. "Can you elaborate on each of these areas?" "Of course," he replied. "Let's start with technology. The entities warned that while technology has the potential to bring great advancements, it also poses significant risks. Our increasing reliance on artificial intelligence and automation could lead to a loss of humanity, where we become disconnected from our own emotions and experiences. It's crucial that we use technology responsibly, ensuring it enhances our lives without overshadowing our humanity." I thought about the rapid advancements in AI and how they were changing the world. His warning made sense. We needed to find a balance between embracing innovation and preserving our human essence. "Next is the environment," he continued. "The entities showed me visions of a world ravaged by climate change and pollution. They stressed that our planet is a living entity, connected to the web of souls. If we continue to harm the environment, we risk severing that connection, leading to catastrophic consequences both in life and the afterlife. It's imperative that we take immediate action to protect and restore the natural world." I nodded, feeling a sense of urgency. The environmental crisis was something we could no longer ignore. It was a call to action, a reminder that our planet's health was directly linked to our own well-being. "And finally, empathy and understanding," he wrote. "The entities believe that the key to a harmonious future lies in our ability to connect with one another on a deeper level. They showed me a world where people of all backgrounds and beliefs came together, united by a shared sense of compassion and respect. By fostering empathy and understanding, we can strengthen the web of souls and ensure a brighter future for all." His words struck a chord with me. In a world often divided by conflict and misunderstanding, empathy seemed like a powerful antidote. It was a reminder that we were all interconnected, and our actions had a ripple effect far beyond our immediate surroundings. "But how do we achieve this?" I asked. "How can we make a difference?" "It starts with awareness," he replied. "By sharing this knowledge and inspiring others to take action, we can create a movement of positive change. Every small effort counts, from reducing our carbon footprint to promoting kindness and understanding in our daily interactions. The entities believe in the power of collective action, and together we can shape a better future." I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The entity's warning was not just a dire prediction, but a call to arms. It was up to us to heed their advice and make a difference. As our conversation drew to a close, Back from Beyond left me with one final message for the night. Remember, the future is not set in stone, he wrote. We have the power to shape it through our choices and actions. Spread the word, inspire change, and together we can protect the web of souls and ensure a brighter future for all. I logged off, my mind racing with thoughts and ideas. The entity's warning had given me a new perspective on the world and my place in it. It was a daunting task, but I was determined to do my part. The next day, I started sharing the entity's message with my friends and family. I spoke about the importance of balancing technology with humanity, protecting the environment, and fostering empathy and understanding. To my surprise, many were receptive and eager to learn more. It felt like the start of something meaningful, a small but growing movement of awareness and action. That night, I logged back into the chat, ready to continue my journey. Back from Beyond was waiting, as always. There's still more to learn, he wrote. But for now, take what you've learned and let it guide you. The entities are watching, and they're counting on us to make the right choices. I nodded, feeling a sense of responsibility. The secrets of death and the afterlife had given me a new understanding of life, and I was determined to use that knowledge for good. As I logged off, I couldn't help but feel a mix of hope and apprehension. The future was uncertain, but with the entity's guidance, I believed we had a chance to make a positive impact. Hey Reddit. As I logged into the secure chat platform that night, I knew this would be our last conversation for a while. Back from Beyond had hinted that the entities had one final message to share, a culmination of everything we had discussed. I felt a mix of anticipation and trepidation as I waited for him to begin. Welcome back, he greeted. Tonight, I need to tell you about the final revelation the entities have shared with me. It's the most important piece of the puzzle. I'm ready, I replied, my fingers trembling slightly on the keyboard. The entities have revealed the true nature of death, he began. It's not just an end, but a transformation. When we die, our souls undergo a process of renewal and growth, guided by the entities. This process is essential for the continued evolution of the collective consciousness of humanity. I leaned closer to the screen, eager to absorb every detail. What does this process involve? When a soul enters the afterlife, it goes through a period of reflection and understanding, he explained. The Hall of Echoes plays a crucial role in this. Souls revisit their memories, learn from their experiences, and gain new insights. The entities assist them in this journey, helping them find peace and purpose. I could almost picture it, a soul traversing the Hall of Echoes, guided by the benevolent entities, gaining wisdom and clarity. It was a comforting thought. But there's more, he continued. The entities showed me that death is not just a personal transformation, but a collective one. Each soul's growth and understanding contribute to the evolution of the collective consciousness. It's a continuous cycle of learning and renewal that shapes the very fabric of our existence. I nodded, feeling a profound sense of awe. The idea that our individual journeys could have such a significant impact on the whole was both humbling and inspiring. However, he added, there's a crucial element that we must not overlook. The entities emphasize the importance of living a meaningful and purposeful life. Our actions, choices, and relationships in life directly influence our journey in the afterlife and our contribution to the collective consciousness. His words resonated deeply with me. It was a reminder that every moment mattered, that our lives were part of a larger tapestry woven with the threads of countless souls. The entities believe that by living with intention and compassion, we can enhance our growth and positively impact the collective consciousness, he said. It's not about perfection, but about striving to be the best version of ourselves, learning from our mistakes, and nurturing our connections with others. I felt a sense of clarity and resolve. So the key is to live with purpose and empathy, I summarized. Exactly, he confirmed. The entities have great faith in humanity's potential. They see us as capable of incredible growth and transformation, both in life and in death. By understanding and embracing this, we can create a brighter future for ourselves and for the collective consciousness. I took a deep breath, feeling a mix of hope and determination. The entity's message was clear, and it was up to us to carry it forward. "Thank you for sharing all of this with me," I wrote. "It's been a profound journey, and I feel grateful for the knowledge and insights." "It's been my honor," he replied. "Remember, this is just the beginning. The entities are always there, guiding and supporting us. Stay true to their message, and you'll find your path." As our conversation drew to a close, I felt a deep sense of peace. The mysteries of death and the afterlife were no longer frightening unknowns, but part of a beautiful and intricate journey of growth and transformation. I logged off, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. The knowledge I had gained from Back from Beyond and the entities would stay with me, guiding my actions and choices. I knew I had a responsibility to share this wisdom, to inspire others to live with intention and compassion. In the days that followed, I continued to share the entity's message with those around me. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with many expressing a newfound sense of hope and clarity. It felt like a ripple effect, spreading understanding and empathy in a world that often seemed divided and chaotic. As I lay in bed one night, reflecting on everything I had learned, I couldn't help but feel grateful. The journey had been unexpected and challenging, but it had also been incredibly rewarding. I knew there would always be more to discover, more mysteries to unravel. But for now, I felt content. The secrets of death had given me a deeper appreciation for life, and I was determined to make the most of every moment. With the entity's guidance and Back from Beyond's wisdom, I felt ready to face whatever the future held. To those of you reading this, I hope you find inspiration in these words. Remember that we are all connected, that our actions matter, and that we have the power to shape our future. Embrace your journey with purpose and compassion, and trust that the entities are with us every step of the way. Thank you for following along. Stay curious, stay compassionate, and always strive to be the best version of yourself. Our journey is far from over, and the future is ours to shape. So I've always been a bit of an adventurer. Not the kind that goes on extreme hikes or anything, but I love exploring the unknown corners of the internet. A few weeks ago, I found myself scrolling through some pretty shady forums on the dark web. I know it's dangerous and stupid, but curiosity got the better of me. That's when I stumbled upon a listing for a map. The description was vague, but it promised to lead to a hidden location that no one had discovered before. I debated for a few days before finally giving in. The price wasn't too steep, and I figured, what's the worst that could happen? After all, it was just a map. When it arrived, it was nothing special to look at. A simple piece of old parchment with hand-drawn lines and symbols. The weird part was, the map seemed to change slightly every time I looked at it, almost like it was alive. I spent hours studying it, trying to make sense of the symbols and the route it depicted. Finally, I decided to follow it. The map led to a dense forest about 2 hours from my house. I packed a bag with some essentials, water, snacks, a flashlight, and my camera, and set out early in the morning. The drive was uneventful, but the feeling of anticipation grew as I neared my destination. I parked my car at the edge of the forest and started following the map. The path was easy at first, but soon the trail disappeared into thick underbrush. I had to push my way through, the branches scratching at my arms and legs. After what felt like hours, I came to a clearing. In the center was a large, flat stone with strange symbols carved into it. They were unlike anything I'd ever seen, complex and intricate, almost mesmerizing. I took out my camera and snapped a few pictures, wanting to document my find. As I examined the symbols, I started to feel uneasy. It was like the air around me had gotten heavier, and a chill ran down my spine despite the warm weather. I shook it off, telling myself it was just my imagination. I traced the symbols with my fingers, feeling their rough texture under my touch. They seemed to pulse with a faint, almost imperceptible energy. Satisfied with my discovery, I decided to head back before it got dark. As I turned to leave, I glanced back at the stone one last time, and the symbols were gone. The stone was smooth and blank, like they had never been there. My heart pounded in my chest. Had I imagined it all? I checked my camera, and the pictures were there, clear as day. I hurried back to my car, my mind racing. When I got home, I transferred the photos to my computer, eager to examine them more closely. To my shock, they were gone. The files had vanished without a trace. I searched every folder, every hidden file, but they were nowhere to be found. Determined to prove I wasn't losing my mind, I contacted a local university and arranged to meet with a researcher who specialized in ancient symbols and languages. I brought the map and described my experience in detail. The researcher listened patiently, nodding along as I spoke. When I handed over the map, he examined it carefully, his brow furrowing in concentration. "This is fascinating," he said. "These symbols don't match any known language or script. They seem otherworldly." I felt a flicker of hope. "Do you think you can help me understand what they mean?" He nodded. "I'll do my best. Leave the map with me and I'll start researching right away." Relieved, I thanked him and left the map in his capable hands. A few days later, I received an email from the researcher asking me to come back. When I arrived, he looked more puzzled than before. "I'm sorry," he said, "but the symbols you described aren't on the map anymore. It's completely blank." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "They were there. I saw them." He shook his head. "I believe you, but there's nothing here now. It's just an old piece of parchment." I left his office in a daze, my mind swirling with confusion and frustration. What was going on? Why had the symbols disappeared, and why had my photos vanished? I couldn't make sense of any of it. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in my mind. The map, the symbols, the photos, they had all been real. But now, they were gone, like they had never existed. I knew I had to go back to the clearing, to see if I could find any answers. Little did I know, my journey was far from over, and the secrets hidden within that forest were just beginning to reveal themselves. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had to return to the clearing. The disappearing symbols and photos gnawed at my mind, making it impossible to focus on anything else. So the next weekend, I decided to go back. This time, I was more prepared. I brought extra batteries for my flashlight, a better camera, and a notepad to jot down anything unusual. I also told my friend Mark about my plan. He thought I was crazy, but agreed to come along for the adventure. We set off early in the morning, the drive filled with nervous excitement. Mark tried to lighten the mood with jokes, but I could tell he was just as curious and uneasy as I was. When we reached the forest, we parked and began our trek. The path was just as overgrown and difficult as before, but having Mark there made it a bit easier. We finally reached the clearing, and to my surprise, the stone was still there, just as I had left it, smooth and blank. Mark looked around unimpressed. "This is it? I thought it would be more, I don't know, mystical or something." I pointed to the stone. "The symbols were right here, I swear. Let's take a closer look." We examined the stone for any sign of the symbols. Mark even tried rubbing some dirt on it to see if anything would reveal itself, but there was nothing. I felt a wave of frustration and disappointment. Had I really imagined it all? Then, Mark called out, "Hey, what's this?" I hurried over to where he was standing, a few feet away from the stone. He had found a small, hidden compartment in the ground, covered by leaves and dirt. We cleared it away to reveal a wooden box, old and weathered. My heart raced as we pried it open. Inside, we found a stack of old papers covered in more of those strange symbols. We carefully pulled out the papers, laying them on the ground. The symbols were different from the ones I had seen on the stone, but they had the same otherworldly feel. Mark took out his phone and started snapping pictures while I took notes. "This is insane," Mark muttered. "What do you think it all means?" "I have no idea," I admitted. "But we need to show these to the researcher. Maybe they can make sense of it." We packed up the papers and started making our way back to the car. As we walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being followed by someone. I was way too much paranoid. The forest seemed unnaturally quiet. The only sounds our footsteps and the rustling of leaves. When we finally got home, we transferred the photos to my computer, half expecting them to disappear like before. But this time, they stayed. We sent the images and my notes to the researcher and waited anxiously for a response. A few days later, I received an email. The researcher was intrigued by the new symbols and invited us back to discuss his findings. Mark and I eagerly went to his office, where he greeted us with a mix of excitement and concern. "I've never seen anything like this," he said, pointing to the images on his screen. "These symbols seem to form a complex code, but I can't decipher it yet. However, there's something you need to see." He pulled up a map of the area around the forest, overlaid with some of the symbols. I ran an analysis and found that these symbols match certain landmarks in the area. It's almost like a map within a map. Mark and I exchanged glances. "So, there's more to this than we thought," I said. The researcher nodded. "Yes, but I must warn you, there's something unsettling about all this. These symbols, they don't just change locations. They seem to be connected to something much older and possibly dangerous. I advise caution if you decide to continue exploring." Despite his warning, I felt more determined than ever. There was something out there, something waiting to be discovered, and I couldn't stop now. We thanked the researcher and left his office, our minds buzzing with possibilities. That night, as I reviewed the new information, I received a message from an unknown sender. The subject line read, "You are not alone." My heart pounded as I opened it. The message was short but chilling. "Stop searching. They are watching." I showed it to Mark, who looked equally disturbed. "Who do you think sent this?" "I have no idea," I said. "But it means we're on the right track. We have to keep going." Mark agreed, but the unease in the pit of my stomach grew. Someone or something didn't want us to uncover the truth. But now there was no turning back. The map, the symbols, the warning, it was all leading to something bigger, something we had to uncover. Little did we know, the deeper we delved, the stranger and more dangerous our journey would become. The forest and its secrets were only the beginning. After receiving that cryptic message, I was more determined than ever to continue. Mark was hesitant, but ultimately agreed to stick with me. We spent the next few days preparing for another trip to the forest. This time we brought more supplies, a tent, food, extra batteries, and a portable charger. We were planning to stay overnight if necessary. We arrived at the forest early on a Saturday morning, our nerves on edge but our spirits high. As we trekked back to the clearing, the forest seemed even more foreboding than before. The shadows were longer, the silence deeper. It was as if the woods were watching us. When we reached the clearing, we set up our camp a short distance away from the stone. We wanted to be close enough to investigate, but far enough to retreat if things got too weird. Once we were settled, we laid out the papers with the symbols and began comparing them to the landmarks the researcher had pointed out. It took hours, but we finally found a pattern. The symbols formed a path that led deeper into the forest, to a place that wasn't on any map. As we followed the symbols, they became more frequent, etched into trees and rocks. It was like they were guiding us. After a few hours of hiking, we stumbled upon another clearing. This one was different, larger and filled with ancient stone structures, covered in the same strange symbols. In the center was a large stone altar, worn by time but still imposing. We approached it cautiously, our curiosity tinged with fear. Mark began photographing everything while I took detailed notes. The air felt thick with energy, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were still being followed. I felt like someone was spying on us and reporting our next move. As we examined the altar, I noticed something peculiar. One of the stones had a small indentation, almost like a keyhole. "Mark, look at this," I called out. He came over and examined it. "Weird. Do you think it could be a hidden compartment?" "Only one way to find out," I said, pulling out my pocket knife. I carefully pried at the edges, and to my surprise, the stone shifted. We worked together to lift it, revealing a small hidden chamber beneath. Inside was an old, leather-bound book. It was covered in dust and cobwebs, but the symbols on the cover matched those we had been following. I carefully picked it up, feeling a chill run down my spine. "We need to take this back and show it to the researcher," Mark said. I nodded, agreeing that this was too important to examine here. We packed up the book and decided to head back to camp. As we walked, the forest seemed to close in around us, the trees whispering secrets we couldn't understand. When we got back to camp, we set up a small fire and sat down to examine the book. The pages were filled with more symbols, along with diagrams and what appeared to be instructions. It was clear this book held some kind of knowledge, but without understanding the symbols, it was impossible to decipher. That night, as we sat by the fire, I couldn't shake the feeling that something bad will happen. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig made my heart race. Mark tried to stay calm, but I could see the tension in his eyes. "We should take shifts," he suggested. "One of us sleeps while the other keeps watch." I agreed, and we took turns keeping an eye on the surroundings. The night was long and filled with strange noises, but nothing happened. When morning finally came, we were both exhausted, but relieved to have made it through the night. We packed up and headed back to the car, eager to show the book to the researcher. The drive back was uneventful, but the anticipation grew with each passing mile. When we arrived at the university, the researcher was waiting for us, eager to see what we had found. We handed over the book and he examined it with wide-eyed fascination. "This is incredible," he said. "I've never seen anything like this. It might take some time, but I believe I can decipher these symbols with the right resources." We left the book with him and went home, both of us feeling a mix of excitement and dread. What had we uncovered, and who had warned us to stop searching? The answers were out there, hidden within the pages of that ancient book. That night I received another message from the unknown sender. This time it was even more ominous. "You are getting too close. Turn back now." I showed it to Mark, and he looked more worried than ever. "Maybe we should listen," he said. "This is getting dangerous." But I couldn't stop now. We were on the verge of something big, something that could change everything. I reassured Mark, promising to be careful, but deep down, I knew there was no turning back. The symbols, the map, the book, they were all part of a larger puzzle, and we were determined to solve it, no matter the cost. Little did we know, the deeper we delved, the more perilous our journey would become. The forest and its secrets were only the beginning, and what lay ahead would test our courage and sanity like never before. The next few days were a blur of anticipation and anxiety. Mark and I waited eagerly for the researchers' findings, checking our emails obsessively and jumping at every notification. The mysterious warnings weighed heavily on my mind, but I couldn't bring myself to stop. We were too deep into this mystery, and I had to see it through. Finally, an email came. The researcher had made some progress and wanted to meet us. We rushed to the university, our hearts pounding with a mix of excitement and dread. When we arrived, the researcher greeted us with a serious expression. "I've managed to decipher some of the symbols," he said, leading us to his office. "But what I've found is unsettling." He spread out several pages of notes and diagrams on his desk. The book seems to be a guide of sorts, describing rituals and locations connected to an ancient belief system. The symbols we've been seeing are part of a larger pattern, a map leading to places of power. Mark and I exchanged nervous glances. Places of power? Mark asked. What does that mean? The researcher sighed. It's hard to say for sure. The book is fragmented and some parts are missing, but it seems these locations are tied to natural energies, possibly even supernatural phenomena. The symbols on the stone you found are part of a ritual meant to tap into these energies. I felt a chill run down my spine. So, what do we do now? The researcher looked at us intently. There is another location mentioned in the book, not far from the clearing you found. It might hold more clues or even the answers you're looking for. But I must warn you, this is getting more dangerous. Whoever sent you those warnings is serious. Despite the danger, Mark and I decided to investigate the new location. We couldn't stop now, not when we were so close. We gathered our gear and headed back to the forest, determined to uncover the truth. The journey to the new location was even more challenging than before. The path was overgrown and treacherous, but the symbols guided us, etched into trees and rocks along the way. As we neared our destination, the forest seemed to grow darker and more oppressive, as if it were trying to keep us out. Finally, we arrived at a small cave entrance, partially hidden by thick foliage. The symbols around the entrance confirmed we were in the right place. We took a deep breath and entered the cave, our flashlights casting eerie shadows on the walls. Inside, the air was damp and cool. The cave was filled with more symbols, glowing faintly in the darkness. We followed them deeper into the cave, our footsteps echoing in the silence. After a few minutes, we reached a large chamber. In the center was another stone altar, similar to the one in the clearing, but larger and more elaborate. As we approached, our flashlights flickered and then went out, plunging us into darkness. I fumbled for my backup flashlight, but it wouldn't turn on. Panic set in as we stood there, enveloped in the pitch black. Then a faint glow appeared, emanating from the altar. The symbols on it began to pulse with a soft rhythmic light. It was both mesmerizing and terrifying. I felt a strange pull, as if the altar were calling to me. "Do you see that?" Mark whispered, his voice trembling. "Yeah," I replied, unable to tear my eyes away from the glowing symbols. "I think it's a message." We moved closer, and as we did, the light grew stronger. The symbols seemed to rearrange themselves, forming new patterns and shapes. I reached out to touch one, and the moment my fingers made contact, a surge of energy shot through me. It wasn't painful, but it was overwhelming, filling me with a sense of connection to something vast and ancient. Images flashed through my mind, visions of ancient rituals, strange beings, and powerful energies. It was like glimpsing into another world, one that existed alongside our own. I saw the symbols as they had been used centuries ago, part of a forgotten practice that harnessed the natural energies of the earth. Just as suddenly as it began, the vision ended. I staggered back, my head spinning. Mark caught me, his eyes wide with concern. "Are you okay?" "Yeah," I managed to say. "I think I saw something, like a vision." We didn't have much time to process what had happened. The glow from the symbols began to fade, and the cave grew darker again. We decided to leave before we were plunged into complete darkness. On the way back, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had unlocked something significant. The visions, the energy, it all pointed to a deeper truth about the symbols and their purpose. But there were still so many questions. When we reached the safety of the forest edge, I received another message from the unknown sender. This one was more urgent. "You are in grave danger. Stop now before it's too late." I showed it to Mark, and he looked genuinely scared. "Maybe we should listen this time," he said. "This is getting too weird." But I couldn't stop. We were on the brink of a major discovery, and I needed to know the truth. The symbols, the rituals, the visions, they were all pieces of a puzzle that I was determined to solve. As we prepared for what lay ahead, I couldn't help but wonder who was behind the warnings and why they were so desperate to stop us. The answers were out there, hidden in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered, and I was ready to face whatever came next, no matter the risk. The warnings had grown more ominous, but so had my resolve. Mark, though hesitant, agreed to one final expedition. We spent the next few days gathering all the information and equipment we might need. The researcher provided us with detailed translations of the symbols and additional maps that outlined the locations we had discovered. According to his research, the final destination was a place of immense power, hidden deep within the forest. We set out early in the morning, determined to uncover the truth once and for all. The path was familiar yet fraught with an underlying tension that seemed to thicken the air. As we ventured deeper, the forest grew darker and more oppressive, the trees closing in like silent sentinels. After hours of trekking, we arrived at the cave. The entrance was unremarkable, but we knew what lay within. This time, we brought more powerful lights and a portable generator to ensure we wouldn't be left in the dark again. We descended into the cave, following the now familiar symbols that seemed to glow with a faint, eerie light. The chamber with the altar awaited us, but this time, it felt different. The air was charged with energy, and the symbols on the walls and altar pulsed more brightly than before. I approached the altar cautiously, my heart pounding. With the researcher's notes in hand, I began to trace the symbols on the altar. As I did, the cave around us started to hum, a low, resonant sound that seemed to vibrate through my bones. The symbols rearranged themselves, forming intricate patterns that began to tell a story. Mark watched in awe as the symbols coalesced into a single, large emblem. When I touched it, a surge of energy coursed through me, stronger than before. The visions returned, but this time they were clearer, more vivid. I saw ancient rituals performed by figures in hooded robes, chanting in a language long forgotten. They stood around altars like the one before us, channeling the earth's energies to achieve incredible feats. But there was more. The vision showed a shadowy figure, an entity that seemed to watch over the rituals, guiding them. This figure emanated a sense of power and mystery, its eyes glowing with an intense light. As I gazed into those eyes, I felt a connection, as if it were trying to communicate with me. The vision shifted, showing the entity hiding the knowledge of these rituals to protect it from those who would misuse it. The symbols were not just a map, but a safeguard, designed to test those who sought the power within. Only those who were worthy and had pure intentions would be able to unlock its secrets. When the vision ended, I staggered back, my mind reeling from the influx of information. Mark steadied me, his face a mix of concern and curiosity. "What did you see?" he asked. I took a deep breath and explained everything: the rituals, the entity, the hidden knowledge. "We're part of something much bigger than we realized," I said. "The symbols, the warnings, it's all a test. The entity wanted to make sure we were worthy." Mark looked thoughtful. "So, what now? Do we keep going?" I nodded. "We have to. We've come this far, and I think we're close to understanding the truth." With renewed determination, we continued our exploration. We found more symbols, each one revealing more about the rituals and the entity. The deeper we went, the more the cave seemed to come alive with energy. It was as if the forest itself was guiding us, urging us to uncover its secrets. Finally, we reached a hidden chamber, larger and more magnificent than the others. In the center was a grand altar, surrounded by intricate carvings and symbols that glowed with a brilliant light. At the foot of the altar lay a large, ancient tome, its pages filled with the knowledge we had been seeking. We approached the tome with reverence, knowing that we had passed the tests and were deemed worthy. As we opened it, the symbols on the pages began to glow, and the air around us thrummed with power. The tome contained detailed instructions for rituals, descriptions of the entity, and the true purpose of the symbols. The entity, as it turned out, was a guardian, a protector of the Earth's energies. The rituals were designed to maintain balance and harmony, preventing those with ill intentions from exploiting these powers. The knowledge had been hidden away to ensure that only those with pure hearts and minds could access it. As we absorbed this revelation, I felt a profound sense of awe and responsibility. We had been chosen to carry this knowledge, to protect it and use it wisely. The warnings had been a test, and we had proven ourselves. When we finally left the cave, the forest seemed to welcome us, the oppressive atmosphere lifting as if in approval. We knew that our journey was far from over, but we had taken the first crucial steps towards understanding and safeguarding the ancient knowledge we had discovered. The symbols, the map, the book, they were all part of a grand design, one that we were now a part of. As we walked back to our car, I felt a deep sense of purpose. We had unlocked a secret that had been hidden for centuries, and it was now our duty to protect it. Mark and I returned to our lives, but the experience had changed us forever. We kept in touch with the researcher, sharing our findings and continuing our studies. The symbols, once a mystery, had become a key to a deeper understanding of the world around us. And as for the warnings, they ceased as abruptly as they had begun. Whoever had been watching us had realized that we were no longer a threat. We had proven ourselves worthy, and the knowledge was safe in our hands. Our adventure into the unknown had revealed more than we ever could have imagined. It was a journey that had tested our courage, our resolve, and our hearts. And though the path had been fraught with danger and uncertainty, it had led us to a greater understanding of the world and our place within it. The forest and its secrets were no longer a mystery but a part of us, forever etched into our hearts and minds.